Welcome to the Unknown Webcast. Yes, indeedy, we are broadcasting live from our right-wing broadcast module in Arizona. So this is your trigger alert that this is not a safe space for those who may be easily offended by having their ideas challenged or by our satire. Today is April 2nd, 2019, and the broadcast number is 139. This week, our friend Dr. Phil Fernandes is with us to look at different approaches to defending the Christian faith. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And of course, we have our senior researcher, Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie, baby.
Yeah. Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came out, saw his shadow, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsors for this webcast are the Bible Buffet. It's not your father's worship experience. The Bible Buffet and the Heresy Conservation Board, ensuring sustainable errors for the 21st century and beyond. The Heresy Conservation Board. And if you enjoy this webcast, or if it just really annoys you and you would like to inflict it on somebody else, then to ensure continued access to this program, please go to midwestoutreach.org and click the yellow donate button to contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to subscribe to us on Facebook. I'm sorry, excuse me, do that too. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Like us on Facebook. Tweet us on Twitter. Do all that stuff. I don't know. Do we have an Instagram account yet? I don't know.
I don't know. They can like our YouTube and subscribe, so that would be good if they liked it.
So Don, you're not in your usual cubbyhole today.
I am not in my usual cubbyhole. I don't have my sign behind me, so you can't say, "Well, there's a sign." No, and I'm a little uncomfortable because I don't have all of my goodies to play with and my multiple screens. My normal camera isn't working here, so I am a little bit out of sorts, but I'm in sunny Arizona where it's 86 degrees. I left Chicago. It was, I don't know, 32, I think, when I pulled out of my driveway.
Okay, 32. Really? It's still that cold up there?
I have no idea because we left Saturday, and I felt kind of like I was driving through a cartoon. You know how you see them? They're driving and they're flying, and the weather goes from sunny, and then there's a line, and they're in the rain, and there's a line, and it's,
yeah.
That's
well,
kind
you know
of
what they say.
Was, yeah.
You know what they say in the Chicago area: if you don't like the weather, wait a minute. So
it'll change, right? Well, we got into a snowstorm on the east side of Albuquerque, New Mexico, on the way here.
Did you take that left turn at Albuquerque?
I didn't. I turned right 4 to 3 times to get to the hotel. So.
Yeah, I knew I should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque. Okay, so
I can't turn left, Ron. You know that. I'm too conservative to
see. But that's what. How do you expect to find your way if you don't take that left turn at Albuquerque? That's what always threw Bugs Bunny off. Exactly. So okay.
So now that we've done all that, Dr. Phil Fernandes is our guy today.
Is there a doctor in the house?
Is there a doctor in the house? But he isn't Dr. House.
I'm still alive and kicking.
That's good, because that guy was kind of cranky.
Yeah, Dr. House is kind of cranky and wrong a lot, but you know he like kills people 5 times before he heals them. It's sort of interesting.
There you go.
And so Phil Fernandes he's a member of the International Society of Christian Apologetics, and you a pastor. Is that correct? You're still a pastor?
Yeah, pastor in Trinity Bible Fellowship, and then I head the Institute of Biblical Defense, and I'm actually heading up the Doctor of Ministry in Apologetics program now for Veritas International University out of Southern California. So it keeps me busy, that's for sure.
Well, that's good. So you got the School of Ministry, you're heading up Veritas, and you've written a book as well.
Yeah, I've written numerous books, but what we'll be talking about today about apologetic methodologies, I've got the recently published Fernandes Guide to Apologetic Methodologies, and people can order it on Amazon if they like, and I've got most of my graduate research was on apologetic methodology. So hopefully people will be interested in what I've got to say. Presented a paper on this at the conference in New Orleans, the EMNR and ISCA conference that we'll be having together. So I'll be titled "A Critique of Contemporary Classifications of Apologetic Methodologies."
Okay. So before we do that, I want to talk just a moment about the conference. It's the annual EMNR, Evangelical Ministers to New Religions / International Society of Christian Apologetics conference. We're combining forces this year at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, and it's always it's an interesting process to put this together, because we have predominantly, how do I phrase this, very good missionaries to cults who do not have academic degrees but are very educated in their respective fields of mission work. And we have a group of scholars who have a lot of credentials and may or may not have as much field experience. So we kind of get them together to get them to talk, so that the guys with the big degrees can realize that just because we don't use $12 words, we know what we're talking about. And it gives our members opportunities to meet the guys that write the books that we read and learn from.
Yeah.
So it's an important, I think it's an important intersection.
Oh, big time. And that's why I'm so fortunate to pastor. I also do some teaching at a Christian high school, because it's so easy when you're in academic circles to never get the opportunity to talk to real people and actually put into practice your apologetic methodology and things of that sort. So I actually like EMR. I like what you guys are doing.
They only have fake people in academic circles, right?
Yeah, we're just kind of battery operated, and yeah, there's nothing wrong with learning $50 words as long as you don't throw the $5 words away. But then
as long as you don't have to go into, as long as you don't have to put those $50 words on your credit card, it's okay. Yeah.
But nobody's ever accused me of sounding scholarly, so I've got the New Jersey cab driver voice. I'm stuck with it till I go to heaven. I don't know if God's going to change my voice in heaven, or maybe everybody's going to talk like me.
You know what? If you want to feel better about that, look up Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman was one of the greatest physicists of the 20th century. He was part of the Manhattan Project, and he was also called in after the Challenger disaster to help. And he played an instrumental role in figuring out what went wrong with the challenge but he talks pretty much just like you, except he's from Brooklyn or Queens. I forget where, but
me, Columbo, that guy. Of course, I'm from Essex County, New Jersey, but Harold Lindsell shocked me when I first read his stuff, The Battle for the Bible. What a scholar! And then I saw him interviewed by John Warwick Montgomery, and Harold Lindsell sounded like my buddies on the block. It was like, you gonna give me a lecture, or you gonna punch me, But he had that tough Brooklyn accent. So.
See that he didn't take note from nobody.
Yeah, and before we're going to get into this question on methodology, but you're bringing up is kind of something important. Is appearances can be deceiving. If you've seen me in my cowboy hat, Phil, Ron knows about that. Kind of everywhere I go, I wear my cowboy hat. I have fringe jackets when it's chilly out or whatever. And one of our bigger supporters, when she was going to get married, had met, the love of her life, but she wanted me to meet him before she would marry him. So she is coming over with them, and in the car, she tells him, "No, Steve, I want you to be careful. Don't let the hat deceive you. There's a lot going on under there. You can't always."
She had to say that.
Pardon?
She had to say that, eh?
She had to say that, yeah. Because it's kind of the thing. The way someone talks, the way they appear, can be a little misleading, because we are sometimes make judgments based on vocabulary, accents.
Well, just to say one more thing about that, and then I want to kind of segue. Richard Feynman, that physicist, sounded a lot like Sid Caesar. When I think of he did when he talked, and it sounded like, and made me want to laugh because he's kind of a humorous guy too, you know. Except Feynman was from Queens and Sid Caesar was from Yonkers, but that's about it. They sounded just identical. But to segue to give the segue I was mentioning, in truth, ministry to cults has really not occupied the attention of academia as I think it should.
Right.
So you know, when non-academics write about it, they're actually filling a void or a vacuum that's left by the academics. It'd be interesting to look into why academia has kind of ignored, you know, the cults.
That's my whole thesis here, is that we try to fit everybody into the same, you know, 5 or 6 categories, and you get a guy like the late Dr. Walter Martin. He doesn't fit. You know, the main categories they give are classical apologetics, where it's a 1-2 approach. You argue for God's existence, and then the historicity of Christianity, like the bodily resurrection of Christ, or the Bible is God's word. There's like the evidentialist approach, where you just get right into historical evidences. You just bypass the God question. You get the presuppositionalists who say you can only argue from God to something else. It's almost idolatry to start with arguing like from creation to the creator, as far as they're concerned.
Well, not to interrupt, but notice how every single one of the... I think we're having a little lag here.
We are. I'm not sure why. It seems like on all 3 of ours we have a little bit of a lag today.
Okay, so what I was going to say is that list that you just checked off, Phil, virtually all of that has to do with apologetics providing an answer for the reason, for the hope that's within us, mainly to the predominant spirit of our age, which is agnosticism, atheism.
I think that's
okay. So,
that's
but that's
problem.
Not really.
That's what I address in my works. Like Steve Cowan's work, 5 Views on Apologetics. 3 are like so closely related. 3 of the 5.
Yeah.
Presuppositionalism is only the Van Tillian type is represented. In fact, it's even misrepresented a little.
No Clarkians there, eh?
And well, yeah, no Clarkian, and then even John Frame is not really a presuppositionalist. He's kind of moved out of it more into the cumulative case or verificational camp, and then of course they represent Alvin Plantinga and his God as a basic belief approach. But it's kind of like what I'm arguing is that scholars need to do more than just try to reach atheists. Atheists make up such a small percentage. And so I've added categories like comparative religious apologetics, which I think EMNR is leading the way there. Paranormal apologetics, you know, whether or not people have questions about Bigfoot and UFOs, and alien abductions and Marian apparitions. And I think there's biblical answers, biblical expressions of all that data. But if we stick with the quote unquote, you know, standard apologetic methodologies, I mean, where would you put Walter Martin? Though he would argue for God's existence and the resurrection, he spent the bulk of his time refuting non-Christian cults. So I think the classification there, comparative religious apologetics. And then I think, like you mentioned, presuppositionalism is not one approach. There's at least 3 different presuppositional approaches: Van Tillian, which I would call transcendental presuppositionalism, the early Gordon Clark dogmatic presuppositionalism, and then Clark's view evolved into scripturalism, a whole different type of presuppositional apologetics. So I think we're just painting very broadly. This is a very complicated, very multifaceted topic, and we're acting like, yeah, we could sum it all up in 5 categories. That's not the case.
I think you said something very important. But before I say it, before I repeat it, the early Christian apologists were like Irenaeus, they were combating heresies. In fact, Irenaeus' famous work is titled Against Heresies. So these were what we would call today cults. These were the Gnostics and so on. And later on, Augustine writes against his former cult group, the Manichaeans. They were cults. They were what we would call cults. That was the original form, as well as giving an answer to Jewish people, giving an answer to pagans.
I mean, if we go all the way back to the apostles, we go all the way back to the apostles. They are presenting evidence for Jesus' resurrection. They say we're eyewitnesses of this. God raised him from the dead. We're eyewitnesses of it. So they're using historical apologetics, but then they're also going to the Jews in the synagogues and arguing from the Old Testament prophecies that Jesus is the Messiah. And then when you see in Paul's letters, he's constantly refuting, constantly doing what we today would call counter-cult work, or what I would call comparative religious apologetics, like the Colossians, the worship of angels, celebrating the feast days, and acting like that was mandatory in a Jewish diet, and not recognizing their freedom in Christ. So I just came on board, and then acted like the only way to do apologetics is to debate the atheist, and in reality, I think that should be a small part of apologetics. And certainly, if we just look at the numbers, comparative religious, paranormal apologetics, you're probably reaching 90% people through approaches like that versus the classical and evidential approach. You're just really zeroing in primarily on atheists, sometimes on Muslims, because they didn't know Jesus' death and resurrection and claim to be God. But whatever the case, that's pretty much my thesis. And I've actually broken it down to where there's 17 different methods, different ways to defend the faith. You can group some of them together under a bigger category, group the different type of presuppositional methodologies, group it under one title as within that, but you're still going to come down to about 7. And then when I close my my work, this paper and the Fernandes Guide to Apologetic Methodologies, I point out that in the end, the best way, I think, to classify apologists is to list the 17 different ways to defend the faith, and then say, okay, well, Norm Geisler, okay, well, kind of person, an apologist, better.
Okay, Phil.
Way. So, Norm,
Phil, we're having a problem on your end. I think you might have to have Pat, if he's still around there, to get you out and bring you back in again.
Okay, it looks like I might have dropped it. He said that I might have dropped out. I might need you to get back in.
No, you didn't drop out.
You didn't drop out. There's a buffering issue.
So, what's the issue?
You're buffering. It's a lot of skittering. We're only getting about every third word.
You're only getting about every third word. I don't know what.
In the settings, Don, can he modify his?
Yeah. If you have, take your cursor. For those who are watching, just bear with us. All right, take your cursor and move it towards the top of the screen, and you get the toolbar we talked about. You might have to actually. It looks like the bars for your phone right next to on there. You want to adjust your bandwidth is what you want to do.
Bring it down a little bit.
Bring it down a touch. Yeah, that'll help.
On my phone?
No, there's.
It looks like the bars on your phone. There's 3 bars.
When you when you bring your cursor to the top, you'll see a rectangle that has.
Where do you want to go? Limit the bandwidth. All right. So is this better?
Yeah.
Now that's
just bring
low
it down.
bandwidth right there.
You went all the way to low.
Yeah, I'm on low right now.
Why don't you go to medium?
Okay. All right. So how's that right there?
Oh, that's better.
Yeah,
Is that better?
Yep.
so far. And you saw how, so Phil saw how you did that. If we need him to lower it even more, we can. But I think I caught most of what he said, but sometimes the picture would drop out too.
Right. So
Go ahead and say something, Phil.
Okay, you guys hear me?
Yeah, we lost some of your words, but more often I think we lost the picture.
Okay.
But once in a while, your words would get really choppy. But I think we
Okay.
caught the gist of what you were saying, and maybe the final video will be okay. We're not sure.
Okay.
What do you think, Don?
I don't know. So the apologetic methodologies are, list those quickly. What are they that you have that you're dealing with?
Well, there's the standard way of dealing with them. There's only like about 5. I'm arguing there's actually about 17, and because there's much more variety in the way that we defend the faith, and then if we focus on each individual apologist, we can say, well, Norm Geisler is a classical apologist who will also do some comparative religious apologetics and also does some scientific apologetics. And so I think we need to get away from overgeneralizing and just trying to pin things down to just 5 different approaches, which is the standard approach, like Steve Cowan's work. You got the classical method, evidential method.
And what you had touched on, what Ron brought out, is the idea of cult apologetics in the early church, as Ron demonstrated, was largely dealing with cults and refuting their claims and making a case for the biblical faith. Now, one of the questions I get very often, someone who comes to me after they've heard me speak at a church or they've seen me in an event or something like that, they go, I want to learn what you're doing. And then they'll start doing some research, and they'll contact me and say, okay, are you a presuppositionalist? Are you an evidentialist? Are you? And I go, I'm the wrong guy to ask that question. And they say, why? I said, because I want to know what question the person I'm talking to is asking. And I want to answer that, right?
Yeah.
I am not an academic apologist. I am a guy that wears a fringe jacket that sparks conversations with unusual people. That's what I do.
Well, I have talked to some apologists, some scholars like Dr. David Hoover, who taught at Covenant College, and I was shocked that he got a hold of him. He debated Gordon Clark back in 1981, taught on staff with him. He was a classical apologist, but I was in awe of him because of his scholarship. He, on the other hand, was in awe of me, and I couldn't understand why. And he told me, he said, I spent my entire life writing and debating about apologetic methodologies. I've never shared my faith and defended it with another person. Well, he shared his faith, but he never actually used apologetics. And he saw me as being much more practical and actually dialoguing with people and things of that sort. So, but I do think that we need to be careful, because I don't, when people ask me how I witness, I just keep it simple. I just give the simple gospel message that we're all sinners. We can't save ourselves. The only way we could be saved is through trusting in Jesus, who died on the cross for our sins, rose from the dead to conquer death for us, and that we need to trust in Jesus for salvation, worship him as God. I keep the gospel message simple. If they raise the bar intellectually by raising objections, then if I can answer them, I try to answer those questions. If I can't answer them, I try to direct them to where they could find the answers. And but the difficulty is when scholars only talk to scholars, we often fail to realize that most people in America, the vast majority of people in America, are not atheists. And in fact, the popularity of the new atheist doesn't mean that all the people that read their books are atheists. It just means that an awful lot of Americans right now are anti-Christian, but that doesn't mean they're atheists.
Right. So we need to make a better case. Now, there are a lot of people out there who think they're Christians, but they sort of want to pick and choose and formulate their own doctrinal beliefs as they go along. You sort of get them by osmosis. And one of our sponsors actually addresses this very topic.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, and they have some questions. For instance, are you tired of hearing all about the difference between the milk of the word and the meat of the word? Are you wondering when your church is going to get around to serving the ice cream and cheesecake of the word? Does your pastor take the whole Bible thing way too seriously? Well, then you need to check out the Bible Buffet. It's not your father's worship experience. Everything at the Bible Buffet is prepared with your comfort and enjoyment in view. Everything there is gluten-free, trans-fat-free, and truth claim-free. And all of their dishes are piping hot and ready to eat. Our regular Sunday specials include Aryan appetizers, Sabellian succotash, Galatian goulash, Gnostic nut salad, and Pelagian pie. And don't forget, the Bible Buffet is a fully accredited ministry of the Church of Smorgasbordianism. The Bible Buffet, it's not your father's worship experience. And maybe it's not yours either. But anyways.
Okay.
I have a feeling it is for all too many people.
So Phil,
Yeah.
some of the questions that we have coming up here, aside from their enjoying our live tech support in action here, is the name of your book. Some are asking for a link
Show
to the
that book again.
which I said
Sure.
you haven't delivered yet, but we'll be giving at the conference. But what's the book?
Lift it up.
It's the Fernandes Guide to Apologetic Methodologies. It's about a 400-page book, and I go over the problems with critiquing with the present classification of apologetic methodologies, and then I argue that we need to recognize that there's more ways to defend the faith. So I give 17 different approaches, and then I argue at the end that we should take each individual apologist as an individual and say, okay, Norm Geisler uses these. He's primarily a classical apologist, but he uses these 3 or 4 other approaches as well. So
is there a Kindle version of your book, or better yet,
I'm not sure on this copy. Some of my books there's Kindle version. Some of them there's not. I know my Hijacking the Historical Jesus, Answering Recent Objections to the Jesus of the Bible, I know that's got a Kindle version. So I'm not sure. If you go, there's about 3 pages of my books and booklets on Amazon.com. If they just search for my name, Phil Fernandes, and that's Fernandes with an S at the end, Fernandes, and they'll find some of them are just lecture notes booklets that I've made as well. And but we try to keep the cost of our books pretty low, and so but that's the book that deals with what I'll be talking about at ISCA and what we're talking about today. So,
see, one of the things that I try to emphasize, of course, I am more of a layman. I hang around with academics and I read all of their work. Like on our way to Arizona here, we're re-listening to William Lane Craig's Reasonable Faith, which is really seminary coursework for seminary graduates. And he gets very, what's the word I want to use? Philosophical, because he's a philosopher. And so you have to listen really carefully and really hard to get the gist of what he's saying. Most of the people that I train and run into, that's not where they're at. Sometimes when you're talking about the expansion of the universe and multi-universes and bubble universes, and you start explaining it and people kind of go, I can't figure out if I prefer Coke or Pepsi. I mean, they just sort of go away.
Yeah. Well,
right?
He's the best at what he does.
I would go with
So
he's the best at what he does, but it's like I think the problem is that we just have too many apologists who want to be William Lane clones. They should respect his contribution, but at least a big portion of us should say, okay, he's doing such a great job using the Kalam cosmological argument for God's existence and defending the Jesus' resurrection. What questions is William Lane Craig not answering in his main works? And maybe I should research that. A good case in point would be Douglas Guyvett, Dr. Douglas Guyvett from Biola's Talbot School of Theology. he realized real early on that it's like, William Lane Craig and J.P. Moreland, Gary Habermas, they got the bases covered. So he started refuting John Hick and John Hick's pluralism, the idea that all religions lead to God. And so that's the kind of approach I think we need to take, is that say, hey, yeah, let's learn from William Lane Craig. But if everybody's a William Lane Craig clone, we become, a lesser William Lane Craig. And there's more questions to be answered than him. I think if William Lane Craig were here today, he would agree that the work he's done is vitally important, but we need, comparative religious apologists. We need paranormal apologists. Gary Habermas and J.P. Moreland, when they dealt with near-death experiences, they were getting into paranormal apologetics. So,
well, in both those cases, for example, Norm Geisler and Bill Craig, when they get a number of cult-related questions, they send them to us. Because that's not really what they do. It's not that they can't defend the faith against the claims of, say, a Jehovah's Witness. It's just not something they normally do. We do.
So
yeah.
So whose phone is going off here? I hear
somebody's phone.
The buzz.
Is somebody's phone
going
yours,
off? Don?
Yeah, the buzz. I had the bell shut off, but it was buzzing away on the desk.
What's the buzz? Tell me what's happening. Well, we're called upon to give the reason for the hope that is within us, not within William Lane Craig. So, we're going to have individualized ways of approaching this. Why are you a Christian?
Yeah.
Why are you not something else? And
I had a colleague who was on a ferry ride from Bremerton to Seattle up here in Washington with a Middle Eastern Muslim that he had just met, and he spent the whole hour giving evidences for God's existence, which the Muslim agreed with. And so I said, did you get the guy's phone number? Are you going to talk to him again? He said, no, I'll probably never see him again. I said, well, you just confirmed his belief in one creator God. You should have dealt with the Muslim with historical evidences for Jesus's death and resurrection and Jesus's deity. And so that's where, but if William Lane Craig, if he bumps into a Hindu, he's going to dialogue with them in a much different way than we see in his books.
Right.
Certainly, we need evidence for God's existence. We need evidence for Jesus' resurrection. We need evidence for Jesus' deity. We need evidence, which Craig doesn't touch on much, but for the inspiration and inerrancy of the Bible. We need those standard things. How do we defend our beliefs? But we've got to eventually realize that we're not talking to people who are blank slates. We got to not only defend our beliefs, but it's like Paul told Titus, that the overseer should be able to not only exhort others in sound doctrine, but refute those who contradict. So if they come to us in our encounter with them with false beliefs, we've got to be prepared to refute those beliefs. Now, if God has called William Lane Craig to specialize on three or four areas, that's fine. And I don't think we should judge him and assume that if he doesn't write on a subject, he doesn't deal with it. There's a lot of times in personal letters, personal correspondence on his website, he'll deal with them. But my concern is people will read William Lane Craig's best-selling books and then just try to become clones of him and act like there are no other questions that are being asked. And that's where
seems to be, to me, that seems to be the human condition, though, Phil. When you get a plan, a program, a book, whatever it is, we try to digest that and to become whatever that teacher, writer, whatever they do. We don't tend to take it and figure out, how does this apply to me individually? So one of the obstacles I have to overcome when I get phone calls from people is to say, okay, the question you're asking me, there's no one answer for, because there is you and how you learn and how you handle information. What you do really well with is the direction you want to go. Secondly, you have to take into consideration the person you're talking to, because not everyone has the same questions that come to you. They don't process the information the same way. They don't have the same questions. They have different goals that they're working toward. And if you don't ask them, what do you believe about whatever the topic is going to be, you're going to be doing just like the guy you were talking about on the boat. You're talking about something that you already agree on, so you're not getting anywhere. I go to a new age. I go to a new age psychic fair. I just was at one a couple of weeks ago, and we have all of these individuals who claim to be channeling angels. So now I know what you're interested in, channeling angels. Now that's a different kind of a question. I want to go up and say, okay, how do you know, just for a point of discussion, that the angel you're communicating with, I'm not going to argue whether they're communicating with a being or not, because I don't know. What I want to know is, how do you know it's a good angel and not an evil angel? Now we have a direction for the discussion that they haven't encountered before.
And I think too that traditional apologetics comes in real well there. Like, Norman Geisler's 12 steps to defend the faith. And if somebody's already at step 4, don't even go over the first 3 steps, but it ends with him providing evidence for an inspired, inerrant word of God. And so when John tells us to test the spirits, because not all the spirits are from God, if we can convince people that the Bible is God's word, that's how you differentiate between whether it's the angelic messenger is from God or coming from the other side. And I do think Norman Geisler talked about this as far back as 1981 in the creation evolution court case. The fact that there seems to be angelic entities involved in these alien abduction cases, and they're obviously good. The message is demonic. It's anti-Christian. It's pro-New Age. And so I really think we need to take seriously some of the questions about paranormal experiences that people are having. And that's what I call paranormal apologetics. Another thing too, David Clark, his dialogical apologetics is very person-centered, where he really deals with what does this person believe? Where are they coming from? Greg Kokel in his work, Tactics, he witnesses to people by asking them questions about what they believe. Well, why do you believe that? How do you know that's true? And as time goes on, people start seeing that their worldview is really weak. And then eventually they just about beg you to share your worldview with them. And so the good thing is there are some academic philosophers that, have woken up and smelled the coffee and realized that we're not just dealing with atheist philosophy professors. We're actually dealing with some real breathing human beings out there who, might believe in aliens. They might be Mormons. They might be Jehovah's Witnesses. They might be New Agers. They might be people who have had paranormal experiences, and they're just looking for an explanation. And certainly the Bible gives that explanation.
We wrestle not with flesh and blood. It's not simply the mind either. I mean, if it's not flesh and blood, it's not strictly flesh and blood being a way of saying we're not, our ultimate battle really isn't against the people who surround us. There's a spiritual war going on, and the delusions and deceptions are spiritual, and they're very, very sophisticated sometimes. And we have every right to assume that there's something demonic going on. Not even just with things like alien abduction, but also just plain regular everyday atheism.
But before I take a debate, I always pray in the name of Jesus and through the power of the Holy Spirit to bind the demons. And because I believe that certain atheist debaters like Dan Barker, I actually think he has a demonic anointing, that what goes on in those debates is just beyond just natural. There's a supernatural demonic aspect. So I think we have to take that into account. And I mean, I'll be honest with you right now, I think the new growing religion in America is what I would call like cultural Marxism, or the social justice movement, political correctness. And it's become a religion to people. And at its very core, it is anti-Christian. And we just start talking about the gospel and they call us racist and things of that sort. So That's what I would call cultural apologetics. Just realize that, look, our culture has become so free and so prosperous because of the Christian worldview. If we're going to kick God out of our culture, um, there's going to be some consequences. And it's really crazy. We even have non-Christians like Jordan Peterson and the atheist, and the Jewish agnostic David Horowitz, who are
Mhm.
now giving cultural defenses of the Christian worldview, not because they're Christians, but because they believe that's what got us the individual rights, human rights, and the freedoms that we enjoy in this country. And they believe that if the new atheists and the politically correct have their way, we're going back to the gulags and the concentration camps. And so I'm just saying that defending the faith is more than just providing evidence for God's existence, to fight more than presenting evidence for Jesus' resurrection and deity, even more than just providing evidence for the biblical inspiration and inerrancy. We've got comparative religious apologetics, even narrative apologetics, like C.S. Lewis, defend the faith by telling stories. People drop their guard when you engage their imagination instead of their intellect, and they don't even realize that they're actually being educated. And that's why Jesus taught so much in parables, and also, so that's what I'm basically arguing is let's stop pretending there's only 5 standard ways to defend the faith, and let's acknowledge that there's such a robust variety within Christian apologetics that we need to acknowledge, like, for instance, what EMNR is doing, what the late Walter Martin did, what Ron Rhodes is doing. I mean, these are guys that are, taking on other belief systems and comparing and contrasting them with Christianity, and then from the Christian worldview, refuting these other religious systems and showing that they're false. And that's pretty much what I'm arguing. Now, I haven't. This will be the first time I presented a peer-reviewed paper on the topic, and was asked to give the Ronald Tabor lectures for Western Reformed Seminary in about 8 lectures on apologetic methodologies. I've got an entire 20 to 30 lecture course online at our website, philfernandes.org. If you click on sermon audio, go to sermons, and then just search for apologetic methods. And so it's not something. It's not. I have not really impacted the apologetic world in the way that I would have liked at this particular point. But as you know, the vice president of ISCA, eventually I'll be the president if everything works well, and hopefully I'll have a greater impact to where we will begin to appreciate apologists who don't spend 95% of their time just refuting atheists, who may represent a very small segment of the United States population. And so we've got to get to the message out to the people in the cults, our Roman Catholic friends. We got to show them where they're missing the boat.
I'm going to go back to, because what you're raising is an important issue. We need to expand our knowledge base of styles and types of apologetics, because there may be something that we're really gifted at that we don't realize is available. That's important.
Yeah.
Secondly, we tend to get comfortable with particular tools of our trade that we can use for multiple types of things, even if it may not be specifically designed for that. The problem with that is, if you're training somebody else and they start thinking that is the only tool, they are shortchanging themselves and becoming less useful in the endeavor of sharing the gospel, which is ultimately what we want to do. So, to me, understanding that there are a variety of apologetic styles, a variety of apologetic schools of thought, and there are some types of apologetics that haven't been invented yet, like UFO apologetics. Alien, who's doing that? Nobody really. Not in a sophisticated, formalized fashion. Is something that should be looked into.
I was going to ask the question, but I think I have my own answer to it, and that is, according to recent surveys, about 22 to 23% of the U.S. population is unaffiliated religiously.
Right. Non-religious.
Yeah, they're the nuns. You know, they have no.
Yeah.
They might answer, I'm
NES,
spiritual.
yeah.
Right. They might say I'm spiritual but not religious, stuff like that. But within that group, only 3% of the total U.S. population is atheist.
Yeah.
And an additional 4% is agnostic. So
And
I was
even
going to
agnostics, some agnostics are hard agnostics, which is just like an
right.
atheist, but some are soft agnostics. It's like, well, I haven't seen enough evidence to believe that God exists, but you
Right.
know, maybe you have, maybe I'm wrong. And
so at the total of 7%, you were saying before, you know, we're focusing the lion's share of our apologetics effort on really what amounts to 7% of the U.S. population.
Right.
And my question was going to be, why do you think that is? My answer is because apologetics as an academic pursuit is pursued at, of course, the higher educational level. And that's where you run into a disproportionate, in other words, they are overrepresented. Atheists and agnostics are overrepresented in academia.
Academia, right.
I think it's a response to the Enlightenment and rationalism, to modernism, and now shifting over to postmodernism. And so it's academic Christian apologists responding to academic secularists who, it's like we even thought that most Americans didn't believe in miracles anymore. And I think the latest research that I've heard on it is like somewhere between 80 to 85% of Americans still believe miracles are possible. So the anti-supernaturalistic bias is not even a Western bias. It's just certain departments on universities. And
right.
But we are in danger when we now there are scholars like Dr. Michael Heiser, who's the language expert for Logos software, that is addressing issues like the paranormal and UFO abductions and things of that sort. And the late Dr. Walter Martin did some work on that. Norman Geisler hasn't done a lot of work on it, but when questioned in a court of law under oath in 1981, he had it all figured out. I mean, it was just like, yeah. And in those residual UFO cases, the 5% that turn out to be real, these are real incidents, but these are supernatural. These are not beings from other planets. These are spirit beings that can manifest themselves physically and are leading people astray. You know, the Space Brothers created us, and we're going to blow the planet up if we don't worship the Space Brothers so that they'll come back and rescue us. And it's the New Age movement is merging with the UFO movement. And so you got, I think it's Gary Bates, the late William Alnor. So there have been several really good books written on the topic of UFOs. Even Dr. Hugh Ross and Ken Samples co-authored a book with another author as well, and on the UFO movement. So there is some work being done. I mean, okay, EMR has been doing its work for a long, long time. We just got to give credit where credit is due. If we look at William Lane Craig and Norm Geisler and say they're apologists and Don Vanneau is not, then I don't even know what you're talking about by apologetics. And that's what I'm arguing for, is that, you know, the comparative religious apologists, the narrative apologists, the cultural apologists, the paranormal apologists, we need to recognize that and then use some of our scholarly resources. You know, by the way, as far as I'm concerned about scholarship, I could care less if somebody's got a piece of paper on the wall.
Well, I can't.
Like when a guy gets behind a pole,
personally, I can't really complain. I'm glad you used me as an analogy, but I have been embraced by the academics, and I'm not certain why. I mean, when they started ISCA, they made me a charter member.
Because you know your stuff.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I have a great jacket. I think it's my friend's jacket that deceives everybody. But
it
you know,
it
speaks of what?
Erudition. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Keep going.
Okay, then I'm on the fringe. But But you know, one of the things that we encounter, Phil, a lot, and you might agree with this, in terms of talking about all of the different types of apologetic styles and methodologies, is many of them are formed in response to heresy, because heresy has been with us for since the beginning of the church, really since the beginning of creation, just about. You know, but there is a problem. We could run out of heresy, so we have a sponsor that addresses that. Actually, that.
Right, it's a danger, and you know what? The situation is dire. According to the latest research, at the present rate of consumption, our supply of heresies will be completely depleted by 2050. The consequences will be disastrous. If this happens, most cults will close their doors by the end of the century, and most heretical websites will completely disappear from the internet. Not to mention the fact that 75% of what passes as Christian programming will disappear from the airwaves and cable TV. The solution is simple: heresy recycling. Whether you're online, visiting a church, or out at the mall, you can do your part. Always look for the label, the HCB label, Heresy Conservation Board, ensuring sustainable errors for the 21st century and beyond. So always look for that HCB label. So when the Mormons come up to you, when Jehovah's Witnesses come up to you, say, do you have the HCB label? Heresy Conservation Board.
Conservation Board, yes, yes. So, and there you have it, Phil. Now, doesn't that kind of solve some of the problems?
Yeah, there you go.
I don't think you know what to make of it.
Just like their police officer, when you run out of criminals, then cops are unemployed. So
right, exactly. This is called job security here, Phil.
Job security. So. Yes. So stylistically, and you say you have 17 different methodologies in your book. What's the title of the book again?
It's the Fernandes Guide to Apologetic Methodologies.
Okay.
The Fernandes Guide to Apologetic Methodologies. Yeah. And yeah, I could just run through the list if you want.
Well, I'm going to want you to do that, but I want to say something, because there's apologetic methodologies, as we pointed out, that aren't even in the list yet, because of things that are coming up, and culture changes every day, and whatever sort of grabs their attention, the new thing that we say, okay, how do we respond to that? They're not asking a question about whether God exists. We're asking a question of whether there's more than two genders. Actually, that's the question. And how does the church address that? How do pastors train their people to live in a world that seems to have lost its mind?
Yeah, and right now I classify that under cultural apologetics, where as our culture becomes more and more secular, I think it's actually becoming more and more neo-pagan. We've got to give the Christian response to that. And the sad thing is that sometimes you get a non-Christian like Jordan Peterson, who will say, no, the government can't tell me to call a guy a girl or vice versa. And but whatever the case, and so with cultural Marxism, I really think we need cultural apologetics to refute this, social justice, intersectionality. I read a little bit about that as one of the methods too, but you're exactly right. I think paranormal apologetics is just part of comparative religious apologetics until the paranormal aspects become so common that it necessitates its own branch of apologetic methodologies to deal with. So you're exactly right. And but I just do not like oversimplifying it and acting like there's only one way to do apologetics when you've got so many different human beings with so many different beliefs on the planet Earth. And when we've got solid apologists that are doing work in these other fields of knowledge, I think that we ought to give credit where it's due and say, hey, that guy is this type of presuppositional apologist. That guy is a classical apologist. He's an evidentialist, but this guy's doing paranormal apologetics. I know Chris Putnam, a friend of mine, just went to be with the Lord not too long ago, but he was writing a lot of books on the paranormal apologetics and near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences. And I didn't always agree with the conclusions that he drew, but just the fact that we had somebody out there doing it, and so I think we just need to appreciate much more the variety within the field of apologetics, and to this date, I think that we're academics just talking back and forth to each other and failing to realize that the guys out there in the trenches fighting the battle are using more than the just the mere classical approach.
Well, that was Norm Geisler's hope when he started ISCA. Within fairly short order, we have been talking about doing combined conferences every 3 years or 4 years, something like that. Because you're getting two different kinds of organizations together, which has its own brand of politics and issues that you have to get through. But it is important because the EM&R membership needs the academics who are doing the rigorous work of research and writing and thinking big thoughts. We don't often have time to do that because we're out there hanging out with witches and angel channelers and that kind of stuff. So we're trying to figure out what it is that they're up to, and we have to read the material these other guys are writing and say, okay, now how does that apply when I'm talking with a Buddhist, for example? I need to know that.
Yeah. And there's guys like David Clark, who wrote a book refuting great apologists refuting Zen Buddhism, and then he co-authored with Geisler a response to the New Age movement. And of course, Geisler also co-authored a work on refuting Islam. And so there are some guys that this is not something that, it's one of the reasons why you and Norm Geisler are buddies. Geisler sees, you see the need for Norm Geisler and what he does. He sees the need for EM&R and what you guys are doing. And I just think that it's great that we can come together. Now, I think one of the issues that we face is the fact that Norm Geisler pretty much started ISCA when he left ETS, the Evangelical Theological Society, because you sign a statement of faith that you believe in inerrancy, but then as long as you redefine what an error is, you can still keep membership there. And Dr. Geisler drew the line in the sand and said the Evangelical Theological Society is no longer evangelical. They no longer hold to inerrancy, and so that's why he started ISCA. So
right. In fact, when I resigned, I suggested in my resignation letter to keep the initials and just change the name to the Elastic Theological Society. Didn't seem to
that would be pretty.
Yeah, they didn't seem to like the recommendation, but it seemed to make sense to me.
Yeah, and it's and by the way, it's a statement of faith there that includes biblical inerrancy and inspiration and the doctrine of the Trinity. So they don't even mention salvation by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. There's so many things they don't mention. And then the few doctrines that you have to sign a statement that you adhere to, they don't even hold you to that. If you want to water down inerrancy, go for it. So that's part of the problem, is that ISCA is trying to fill the gap left by ETS. So if you are truly evangelical and you're a professor or whatever, ISCA gives you a place there. At the same time, so few are upset about what's going on at ETS. And there might be 15 guys that are watering down inerrancy, and then 5 guys like myself, Joe Holden, Bill Roach, Norm Geisler, and David Farnell that are fighting it. But it's the other 70 or 80 leading apologists that just don't want to get involved, and they're not going to confront their buddy on this. And so that's killed the Evangelical Theological Society. But I think that ISCA is so close, our goals are so close to what EM&R is doing, that at the very least, we've got to continue this. We're like sisters or brothers or sisters that are out there, and it's kind of a 1-2 punch. Our guys, we like to present papers. A lot of your guys are doing the PowerPoints, which, by the way, I find the PowerPoints much more interesting. To be honest with you, it's hard to stay awake even when I'm the one reading the paper. But whatever the case, I think that it's a win-win when we can join forces, and I think we can reach a lot more people. And I think you guys will become a lot more like us, and we're going to become a lot more like you, hopefully in the good areas, as we rub off on each other and get to know each other. But I thoroughly appreciate the work. And now, wasn't Gordon Lewis one of the founders of EMNR?
Gordon Lewis, Walter Martin, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You cannot be more scholarly than those two guys. I mean, that's scholarship at its best. So this was a EMN ministry, founded scholars, apologetic scholars, but Gordon Lewis and Walter Martin understood. Even Stuart Hackett mentioned it, that especially with Eastern thought coming into the West and this neo-pagan thought. So
sounds like we're losing you again.
It seems like, and it's time for us to start our wrap up.
What's that?
It's time for us to start our wrap up. So after we're done, I'm going to post on my website, the Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. website, the links to the EMNR conference. For others, they can go directly to the emnr.org webpage, and all the information is there, how to sign up and register, what the workshops are, what the plenary speakers are. It's a good lineup. We've got a good conference this year, May 2nd and 3rd, and New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary is really a great institution to have this at. They're very involved in apologetics. Plus, they have a hotel right across the street, so it's simple to get to. It's good situation. So, Ron, do you want to walk us out of here?
Okay, let's do that. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Our culinary services come from Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D Opposer. Our Mormon Archives Manager is Polygamus. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey. Transgender Issues comes from Ben Hur. Our Special Correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys is Ode to Humanity. Our Fact-Checking Supervisor is Yoleg Pulling. Our Technical Assistance comes from Murky Research. Our Legal Advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Our Grievance Resolutions Director is Giovanna Pisami. Our Director of Privacy Assurance is Wiretapping, and our original idea sourcing comes from Drew Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, but you'll never, ever be able to prove that in a court of law. It'll never happen.
Never.
It hasn't happened once.
Okay, Phil, it's good having you, and now you know you've been had. We had a lively discussion in our chat area today. That was kind of fun to watch that going on. So, so Phil, we will see you in a month at
New Orleans.
Yep. And to the rest of you, we won't be here next week, but we'll be back the following Tuesday. So, blessings to all. Adios.
Adios.
All right. God bless, guys.